Okay, great. We are live. So, for those that are watching, I'm Patrick Weinert, the host of the Money Mission Live, and I have a real pleasure today to interview a new friend of mine, Dan Lesniak. And Dan and I met actually at a local meetup here in Washington, D.C., that Dan and his group hosted. And I wanted to bring him on and talk a little bit about real estate investing, both for realtors and then also for investors. So Dan, I want to say first, welcome. Thanks for being here, and it's a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show and get in front of your audience, and hopefully provide a ton of value today.
Absolutely. What I wanted to do is talk a little bit about your background first. So for those that are watching, Dan has been in real estate for many years. Like I mentioned, he is based here in the DC area, although he has a lot of experience in many different areas. His group does real estate work in Maryland, DC, Virginia, and other states. But what I want to do is emphasize that Dan has really accomplished quite a bit during his time. His first year, he did, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, you did like 22 million in sales. And then you've built, you've built a business now. Really, it's a $1 billion business. You're a best-selling author. And now with eXp Realty, you're continuing to grow and offer other services too, to include coaching and helping those who are interested in getting involved. And we'll maybe touch on some of that stuff later on. But I just want to say that your background is quite impressive. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about, what got you interested? What started your interest or got you first interested in real estate, both selling it and investing in it, and everything that you do?
Yeah, I think I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, or listened to it when I was at the Naval Academy, and that had an influence. And so the first place where I had an extended tour, where I was going to be in the same area for more than like a year, was near Jacksonville, Florida. I was stationed in Kings Bay, up in Georgia, actually on the border. And I decided, I knew this was going to be a 3-year tour. So I'm like, well, I'll go buy a house. And I used the VA loan, bought my first house for $180,000, brand new house.
Wow.
Back then. Probably doesn't cost that much anymore. They've gone up a lot. So I'm dating myself a little when I tell these prices, but that was back in 2003. And then the following year, I bought another house in the same neighborhood and turned that into a rental. And that was kind of how I got my starting point, just being in the Navy, saving money, using the VA loan, and, doing buy, hold, landlording stuff, flipping, all that kind of stuff. Right. And then I moved up to DC when I was stationed at the Pentagon. I got out, stayed in the area, became a defense contractor. I got my MBA, and I had visions, I guess, of being a consultant, strategy consultant, and all the typical kind of MBA moves, and ended up getting my real estate license and just doing it on the side. And it's picked up so much steam so quickly that I was like, shoot, I'm going to quit my full-time job and do real estate full-time. And then that was the year I sold a little over 22 million. And since then I've built, was fortunate enough to meet my wife in real estate as well. And we combined our teams and built up the Carrie Scholl team to a team that last year sold over 700 million in volume. And since then we've added other verticals, other pillars of income. So we do real estate development in the DC area. We have an Airbnb portfolio in Florida, which we're actually going to make the DC developments we've made available for a number of years to investors, but we're making one of our cash flowing Airbnb assets available to investors soon in Florida. So that's going to be like a new venture for us, and a great offering, I think, to people that want to get started in short-term renting, properties, but don't want to dive in and do the whole thing themselves. So we've been at this at a high level, I think, for a decade now, and um, still loving it, still enjoying it, still learning as well, and hopefully making an impact on more and more people. I think the EXP platform is going to let us do that, because now we have a vehicle to, bring on agents in any market, any area, and give them our training, give them our coaching, and help them grow their business.
That's great. Yeah. You mentioned that you are a veteran, um, and that you served in the Navy. And a lot of my audience, although not all of it, and just so people know, Dan and I were talking about this in the studio beforehand. A lot of my followers, a lot of those who um, are maybe even viewers on the show, are veterans or even active duty military. And you were talking a little bit about the VA loan. Um, what is a way, or what would you recommend for those who are just getting started? Say they may have very, very little knowledge about real estate. Maybe they're very young, they want to buy a house. What's something that, a few tips that you would have for them as far as getting started, either in, a long-term rental or an Airbnb? And I know these are different areas, but if somebody's interested in that, what's something that you would recommend they would do?
Well, for veterans, I think you should really use that VA loan, and you can use it. It doesn't have to be a single family. You can buy a 4-unit with your VA loan, up to 4 units. So you can kind of do there's the traditional house hacking thing that a lot of people talk about, where you buy a house and rent out the other rooms. Well, you could go buy a 4-plex and have a whole unit to yourself and rent out the other units. And the VA loan limit now is unlimited. It used to have different limits on it depending on geography. And a few years ago, they took the cap off it. So depending on your, you still have to qualify the debt to income ratio, and find a lender that'll do it, obviously. But there's a lot of potential for getting into a property, doing the house hacking thing, or getting a small multifamily up to 4 units, renting out the other ones, making cash flow. And a lot of places probably pencil where you can do that without, you can get positive cash flow without putting money down. So it's a massive opportunity.
Could you literally get, say, a 4-plex, live in 1 unit, rent out the other 3, and structure it in a way where you didn't have to? I mean, I know you don't have to use a down payment with a VA loan, but could you do it in a way where you wouldn't have to put any money down? Like,
yeah, VA loan, you don't have to put money down, right?
Right.
You didn't want to use the VA loan and it was an investment property, you could go out and find partners and have creative structures. So, yeah, there's a lot of different, ways to get into properties without any money down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for those that are already in real estate, for those that already maybe have some investment properties and have some experience, you mentioned multifamily. What do you see? You'd also mentioned Airbnb, that you guys do that too. What do you see right now as being kind of the most undervalued sector, right? The one that's most lucrative and maybe the least known about?
A lot of people jumped into Airbnbs over the last couple of years. So, I'm glad we were kind of into that field early, for sure. Because you have this situation now where the number of bookings is up overall, according to Airbnb's data. So that sounds like, oh, this is great then, right? But the supply is also up. There's more people buying them and doing them. So, you have to consider that. So people that are experienced operators know how to position themselves better than the competition with short-term rentals, have a good opportunity right now. I think, long-term rentals are still looking really, really great. Rents have gone up a lot. I think with interest rates going up, buying a house got less affordable for a lot of people. So some of those buyers are going to go back to the renter pool. So it's going to drive up rental rates. So I think
Right.
assets that are good cash flowing assets are ones you want to look at now. And you mentioned something about people getting started. I think it's important to do a lot of education up front. So read books, listen to podcasts, go to real estate meetup groups. You mentioned the one we hosted last month. So there's a whole bunch of different free or low cost ways to get education. So make sure you're taking advantage of those opportunities. And then at some point you gotta jump in and just do it.
Yeah. Are there any particular books? I know you mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Are there any like real estate specific books that you think are worth taking a look at?
Yeah, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think is a great one. Any of the Bigger Pockets books. So that's an online investor community that also has like a publishing side. They've got a podcast as well. So there's a ton of good resources if you just go to Bigger Pockets. So I recommend checking them out.
Okay. And I know, Dan, that you offer coaching too, right? Like you provide coaching. Is that through EXP or is that a separate thing?
Well, we do coaching for real estate agents. We don't do it for investors. We do like our investor meetups, which are free, but we've had a coaching program that does events. We have online courses. It's called HyperFast Agent. So you can go to hyperfastagent.com and check that out. And there's different levels to that, right? We have some people that are just doing the courses and other people that are at quarterly masterminds with us. So there's different levels to that. And then we give access to different coaching programs to the people that join us at EXP. So we give them our courses. We give them the Harris Premier. He's my partner at EXP, Tim and Julie Harris. We give them Harris Premier coaching. So when an agent joins us at EXP, they're getting a lot of resources that other people have to pay for. And, our goal is to help them build their sales business, help them build their recruiting business. So.
Yeah, that's great. I was thinking too a little bit about you when you alluded earlier to the idea that, some people don't necessarily want to jump in and buy a whole property themselves, that there are other opportunities, to be invested. Obviously, REITs are one way to do it, but you had mentioned that, you guys do something where you bring investors in. Is that something that you still do or are currently doing?
Yeah, we've been doing that in the DC market on development deals, which are things that we flip. We've been doing that in the DC market for quite some time. And I've had a number of people ask me about doing that for our Airbnbs. They want to get into these cash flowing assets and get more long-term appreciation, tax benefits, and all that. So we're taking one of our Airbnbs. It's a duplex near the Fort Lauderdale beach. It's a great property. Like this month, we've got over 20K of gross rental income on it, just for 2 units. So
wow.
We're going to be putting that one or making that one available to a limited amount of investors. Like we probably have room for like 15 or 12, maybe, not a lot, right? So you can get in with as little as 50,000. You're going to get cash flow right away, and then tax savings, long-term appreciation. And, you'll get to see how a good short-term rental portfolio or property is managed and run, without having to jump in and do it alone for the first time.
Right. So not only would you get a return on your money, but you'd also get an education in the process.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a huge advantage.
So I'm doing a webinar on that next week. So I don't know if we can share.
Yeah. I mean, what I can do is if you want to send me the link, I can share that link below this video, with everyone. So for
Sure.
those who weren't able to see it right away,
Yeah, I
you
went
know,
ahead and put it in the chat. But
okay, perfect.
yeah, so
Yeah,
we're doing that Monday at 11 a.m. And then if you can't make it, I can send the presentation to anyone really, so they can just.
and how Dan would someone like reach you? Do you go? Is it danlesniak.com? Is that your website?
Yeah, that's one way. My email, dan@danlesniak.com
Is another
is
way?
fine. Or you can find me on social media, just with my name. I'm on all the platforms.
Because I know that you host, meetups, you host meetings, where you share a lot of valuable content. I was at, the one that you did recently, and I thought it was really well done. So I'd highly encourage people to go, meet you and see, the education and the products and the services you provide. Um, so those are the best ways to reach you?
Yeah,
I'm going to,
just
go ahead.
email or social media.
Okay, great. Okay. Are there any other uh, really piece of advice that you would have when it comes to maybe long-term buy and hold investors? And we could tailor this to military or not. Is there are there areas that you would recommend they look at and areas that you wouldn't? And I know this is kind of a broad question, but I've been looking at real estate in the DC area for some time. And I will say that it's a little harder to find real long-term investment properties, at least in DC proper, that
The cap
are,
rates are low, so
yeah,
to make it work from a cash flow, you usually have to do some type of value add, increase sizes, quality, unit count, right? Any of those things. So you typically in DC, to get decent cash flow, you're going to have to do a value add.
right.
Other markets, you can just go in and do something pretty darn minor or maybe even nothing at all, and already be at a decent cash flow
Where,
rate.
where are some of those markets at in your
They're
experience?
usually places with smaller median home prices, secondary markets, tertiary markets. So they're typically outside of the big cities.
Okay. Well,
A lot of military places are pretty good too, because they're not typically the highest cost places, right? And
right.
there's always people coming in, PCSing in and out. So I think that's an advantage military people can kind of have, is they can, just build up a portfolio by buying in a place, getting owner occupied rates. Then their tour of duty's up in 3 years, and then they go to a next city, right? Well, you just move out and become a landlord. So
Right.
that's, I've seen that strategy work quite successfully for people in the military.
Can military, I know that you can potentially have two VA loans, right? Like
Yeah,
you could
you can have multiple. It does affect like your certificate of eligibility. So then on the follow-on ones, like the second one, you'll probably have to come to the table with some sort of down payment depending on the lender. And so the answer is yes, but then you might have to pay more in down payment or funding fee.
Right. Is it a viable strategy in your experience to maybe buy a home? If you buy a home near a military base with your VA loan and then you move, maybe if interest rates are more favorable, refinance with a conventional loan, and
You
then use
could.
VA.
I doubt anyone's going to be doing that right now, though. But,
Right.
well, maybe if you bought now and then you moved, maybe in 2 years, maybe they're lower. So
Yeah.
that's an option. Or you can do a VA interest rate reduction loan. It's an EARL. It's like a fast track finance. I've done that before, where I had one rate and then it went down a year later, and the lender called me up, so we can essentially kind of just modify your loan, make the rate lower. It was like a fast track refi program for VA, and it was quick. It was under a month, and So that's an option as well.
Okay. Well, let's see. I don't necessarily think we have any questions at the moment, but we are gonna obviously have this video posted here inside our Facebook group, and then we're also going to put it on YouTube and on LinkedIn as well. So I'm sure we're going to get more questions here in the future. But did you have anything else, Dan, that you wanted to mention about the market right now, where you see it going, or anything else that you would recommend for people that are interested in investing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, right? I definitely don't think it's 2008, although some buyers feel that way. It's not 2021, although some sellers feel that way.
Right.
We still don't have a ton of supply. Transactions are down, but they're down off of 2021, which was up 20%. So, we're not really seeing dramatic changes in values yet. We are seeing fewer transactions. So I think it's going to be some sort of stalemate for a while, and then we'll see what happens.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good to know. So if people are ready right now to invest, you would encourage them to do so.
Just make sure the deal cash flows. Like that's why I really, for investors, I really like this short-term rental property that we're making available in Florida.
Right.
So if you are going to jump into short-term rental by yourself for the first time, make sure that it pencils as a long-term rental as well. I always tell people that. So
that's a good point.
Vacation patterns change or whatever, you've got a backup plan, a plan B.
That's actually really good advice. I didn't even thought of that. Yeah. If you're going to get something as a short term, make sure it makes sense as a long term as well. So
right.
You got a plan B. That's great advice. Well, I just want to say, I think we're getting close to our time, but Dan, thank you very much for spending some time here with me, with my audience, giving them value, giving them some of your experience. And again, just as a reminder, Dan Lesniak with eXp Realty, lots of experience in real estate. If you're just, joining us now, I'm going to post later. I'm going to post below this video the links to his webinar, as well as how to reach him. He gives lots of advice, which really just brings value to others, particularly military, since Dan himself is a Navy veteran. And Dan, thanks again for being with us. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be able to have you back on here in the near future again and continue talking to my audience.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Bye.